Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Rise of the Phoenix. This video is going to be part 2 of my commander itemization / equipment guide. This video will focus on damage dealing commanders, what items you'll want to focus on for them. The goal of this video / guide isn't to tell you exactly which items to use, because that's going to be somewhat dependent on which commanders you're using and which faction you are. Instead, hopefully I can explain my general thought process on why particular types of items are good, and then you can use that knowledge to figure out the best items based on which commanders you're using and which faction you're playing. Before we get into it, if you enjoy my content, please do consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Welcome back everyone. So in case you missed the very first part of the video, which should hopefully help you figure out what type of commander any given commander is, I'll share a few examples of damage dealing commanders. We have Legolas, Gimli, and Tier 2 Aragorn as main examples for the good factions. For the evil factions, we'd be talking about Lurtz, the Shadow, potentially Agzok. So what you want to look for, if we use Legolas as an example, is a whole bunch of abilities that deal damage. This way you know that your commander can actually have enough damage potential to be used as a damage dealing commander. So if we looked at Legolas's skills, we can take a quick glance at Gimli's. We have damage, 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 damage. And would you look at that? Some more damage, break defenses, and heavily wounded. Gimli, I think, has the most damage skills in the game. It's actually a little bit ridiculous how many different damaging abilities he has. So now that we understand what a damage dealing commander is, let's talk about what sorts of items you'll want to look for on them. So in general, you're going to want to stack as much might as possible, as might will scale their physical damage. In the case of the Shadow, I do believe you would actually want to stack focus on him. I'm not entirely sure what exactly the interaction is between his normal attacks and them like dealing poison damage to everything. I would assume that focus would at that point increase it, but since the base effect is just changing his normal physical attack into poison damage, then it might actually be the case where still stacking might is the correct choice for him. If anybody knows exactly how that interaction works, please do let me know. He is a bit of a weird commander when it comes to dealing damage, so in general, you want to remember that might is your friend, as it will scale normal attacks and physical attack damage. So what sorts of weapons do you want to look for? Unfortunately, I don't have an exact example left, but if we look at the items here, the item that I would recommend for most physical damage dealing commanders would be a battle axe with the flay attribute. That's the attribute that allows that commander to ignore part of the target's defense during the first 4 rounds of combat. For Legolas specifically, because he does a whole bunch of normal attacks, I think you'll want to find some weapon like a Mirkwood bow or an Elven dirk, anything with one of these physical damage procs on it for him specifically, although the flay axe will still be good for him as well. So you want to find a weapon that has a lot of might, and then like in Lurtz's case, you can also add speed onto it because some of his skills scale with speed. But in general, like I said, might and flay on your weapon, that's kind of like the most core thing that all of these damage dealers will share if you can get access to that. As far as the armor, I think that scale mail with Gallant is pretty viable. I have Gallant on Legolas because his might is actually, his base might is actually a little bit low for a damage dealing commander. His might growth is not that great, especially compared to somebody like Dane or Dwalin, Gimli, those dwarven commanders that have a lot of natural might. Another good option, though, would actually be, believe it or not, melee vigor, because the damage that your commander deals is actually based in part on how much of their army is left alive. So if you can pick up some defensive stats, such as melee vigor, since you're going to be using melee units to tank, this can actually be beneficial for you as well, particularly on commanders that already have plenty of might on their own. They're not necessarily going to need that extra might boost in order to push them to the next level of damage. They very likely are going to get more of a benefit out of something like melee vigor, keeping their army alive in order to deal extra damage. If you're using one of the dwarven damage dealing commanders, since good side factions have access to guardians and they are super good at taking damage, super good at tanking, you could potentially look at something like this that's going to increase specifically dwarven defense. But for the most part for these videos, I want to focus on purple items. That way it is more applicable to more players, as for the majority of people, like probably 99.5% of the players of this game, you're not really going to be able to strengthen and refine your golds, just because you're not going to have enough golds unless you're spending a ton of money and cracking a bunch of chests. So I do want to kind of keep these videos focused around purple gear because of that. So that's why in general I'll more or less be ignoring gold gear. Another good option, getting back to the video here, is the Shroud Effect on the Superior Halberd. And it also comes on, I thought I still had this guy, a Scout's Mail. So Scout's Mail can also get the Shroud Effect. This is going to give your units, once it's refined, a very substantial chance to evade the first instance of damage. This is just kind of another spin on that melee vigor idea, where you're keeping your army alive for a little bit longer, which will allow you to deal more damage. The Scout's Mail in particular being very good on commanders that can also scale their damage with speed. Moving on to the helmet slot, I think the obvious winner for the most part will be the full helm. It gives pure might. It can also roll melee vigor. Mine unfortunately has men vigor, but it can also roll melee vigor. There can definitely be an argument made, especially for evil factions, for the brutal helmet, because it gives melee army, wow. It gives the melee troops in your army health, and that extra bit of health is, like I said earlier, going to help them live longer, let your commander deal more damage. I forget exactly what. Yeah, this guy can't get melee vigor. I couldn't remember for sure if it could get melee vigor or not, but it can. So that is definitely a very, very good option for the evil factions. And in case you're worried about Sauron or other madness commanders, a Horseman's Helm with Resolve is a perfectly viable option. That way you don't run the risk of your commander just completely shredding your own army during, like for Sauron, during those madness rounds. So I think this would be another very respectable choice. It also somewhat opens up the potential of running like Cataphracts or Swan Knights as your tank unit instead of Guardians, because against most things, they're going to be more tanky. What you'll have to watch out for in that case is Halberdiers, Guards of the Tower, Raiders, anything that counters cavalry units in general. In those cases, I do believe Guardians will hold up better against all of those anti-cav abilities. And then, moving on to our last equipment slot, I think the Hithlane is a very good choice for a lot of commanders. It gives a reasonable amount of might for an accessory slot. A lot of these accessories are geared more towards focus, speed, and other things. The Hithlane, very, very solid choice. Mend is a good one to pick up. The army HP is very nice to help keep your guys alive. The other thing you could do, potentially, if you are a good side, is pick up Bane of Orcs. I feel like Reapers are kind of making somewhat of a comeback, and Raiders as well. Reapers because good side has very solid, maybe this is just on my server. Reapers because good side has very good access to ranged units, and Reapers kind of just tear them up. And Raiders because they are quite nice against all of the good side cavalry units. So you could take a Bane of Orcs and refine it up and have that in your back pocket in case you do run into something like Mouth of Sauron, Gothmog, Gorbag, somebody running a whole bunch of orcs. In general, though, I think you're going to get more value out of Mend, as it's going to be applicable regardless of what you end up fighting. As for the evil side, Drums of Moria is not at all a bad option. The Bane of Dwarves is quite good because Guardians are very prevalent for good factions. So are Ram Riders. Ram Riders are very popular on damage dealing commanders as well because of their defense reduction. And Axe Throwers are another really popular unit because they can kill trolls, and not being able to kill trolls is really bad when alchemists are completely dunking on your army during the Trolls taunt. So Dwarven units are very, very popular units for good factions to use. So this would be a nice little boost against all of those units. Plus, the drums in general comes with a nice spread of stats. And why not a little bit of army attack? This part isn't really super applicable to a damage dealing commander, as you're going to be running like Crushers or Dragoons, and Crushers don't really deal a lot of damage on their own. But hey, I mean, every little bit helps. We'll take one last glance through the item list to make sure I didn't forget any honorable mentions. See, Hobbit Fiddle is not good. Pipe, not good for damage dealers. I guess like a Harp with Pursuit might have some use case. In general, I don't think that it would really be worth it over the Hith lane, though. Wizard's Fireworks, it's definitely, you don't want that on a damage dealing commander. So yeah, I think I remembered to cover all of the important purple items. Oh, Warhammer for Dwarven Commander is a very solid option as well, as it can boost up your Guardian's defense. So in general, just a quick recap at the end of the video here. For your weapon slot, I promise one of these days I'm going to get better at doing this finger thing, this thumb thing. Weapon slot, you want the Battle Axe with Flay or a weapon with a damage proc. In general, I think the Battle Axe with Flay is better. In your armor slot, you're going to want to look for Might and or Speed if your commander can scale off of Speed, and you want some type of defensive stat or a Might increase. In your helmet slot, you're looking for Pure Might or potentially Army HP on top of some Might. If you're worried about Madness, you can pick up an Anti-Madness helm. This guy with Aegis is actually ridiculous. Throw out a little honorable mention to this. So, stun and madness immunity, pretty crazy. Anyway, I said we weren't going to talk about gold items, and we talked about a gold item. Helmet slot, you want to pick up more Might, potentially Army HP, potentially madness immunity if you're worried about that. And then in the accessory slot, I really think Hith lane is quite solid for good factions. And I think drums is very respectable for evil factions as well. I don't remember exactly every single accessory evil can pull, though, in terms of their purple accessories. I remember like Signet of the Barrow, that Barrow's, that's what it's called. That's a gold, which is quite nice as well. I really feel like there's a purple accessory for evil factions that I am just not remembering. I'm just blanking on right now. But hopefully, overall, these ideas give you the general goal of what you want to look for in a damage dealing commander for their items. That way, based on whatever items you have, you can make the best decision as to which items should go to which commanders and which items you should invest in as far as strengthening and refining goes. Let me know what you think about my opinions on itemization down in the comments below. That's it for this video. I'll catch you in the next one. Rise of the Phoenix, over and out.